I also wanted to pivot to, so are the odds makers in on this? Like, Brian, do you ever look at like a client sheet and be like, what? Caesar's Palace
Hey,
is a
Brian, that's
client?
good.
Why?
That's a good one.
How we doing, everybody? We are Two Johns and a Mike.
I feel like the major leagues and, in other sports, they're looking for prospects like younger and younger and younger. And I could be wrong, but I feel like that started with like the video era, because I witnessed an entire cottage industry. And in this area, I saw like 2 or 3 like video businesses explode that concentrated on, hey, we'll come out to every high school game and videotape your kid throwing a ball every time, and we'll compile it together and we'll get it to scouts so you can show them to colleges and blah blah blah. And I feel like that, with the addition of analytics, now there's like a feeding frenzy on, if somebody gets a whisper, hey, there's a 6-year-old that can throw a fastball, and 7 agents show up at the house. I mean, am I wrong on this?
No, that's going to be a separate podcast, John, honest to God, because I am an agent now, and I can't believe that I was making a call to a 15-year-old the other day. Brian, buddy, like but he's like the 7th ranked player, and honest to God, I went over his swing and everything else like that. I was like, this is worth a call, because he's already getting calls from Mezarowski's agent and other people around and there's so many greasy people out there these days. So I'm like, I gotta get on top of this. And it's amazing how early people are identified now. That's a longer discussion, John. It really is. We have to talk about that for a full podcast, because I also have to be very careful with what I share. But at the same time, like, that people need to know about this stuff, because parents don't understand how confusing things are going to get, and they're going to be the ones having to deal with this unless they have an advisor that they can trust. And good God, buddy, you hit the nail on the head. Like, yeah, you see this stuff and it's out there, and that speaks to our social media stuff, where you get all this exposure, and these guys are getting exposed so early in their life. They shouldn't be going through this.
I also wanted to pivot to, so are the odds makers in on this? Like, Brian, do you ever look at like a client sheet and be like, what? Caesar's Palace is a
Brian,
client?
that's good.
Why?
That's a good one. I had all this information when I was in True Media, and like, Brian obviously works for him now. Like, people would be calling me when we talked about betting. Hey, can you send me a comprehensive breakdown of like this pitcher versus this? Like, no, I can't. That is a direct violation of my contract agreement.
Yeah,
I cannot do that. Like, and I'm not willing to sully my reputation because you want to win a $100 bet. Go f yourself. Everybody, if you're listening to this show, like and subscribe, because we have some really good content coming out. And if you enjoy it, please hit that button. We're on YouTube, we're on Instagram, TikTok, every other social platform. So please, if you enjoy our content and you want to see Brian Duffley back, the engaged Brian Duffley women, sorry. We would love to see a little bit more run. So please hit that like and subscribe.
Yeah. I think, to kind of get back to the like question about some of the exposure things, is like, we do work with some video companies that, are filming like high school showcase games. I think what Eli was kind of touching on, it's all about just getting some sort of like, I got to get on a mound in front of these scouts at this showcase game and like show them what I got or whatever. Where before it was like, if you're not in California, Florida, Texas, like one of these feeder states, and you're some kid that's absolutely crushing it in New Hampshire, you just got to hope an area scout comes across you. It's like,
exactly,
now you can drive wherever to, go to the showcase game. You'll have some sort of eyes on you, or if you're playing it in the Northwoods, area codes, things like that, where you can get cameras on you, have guys watch. Like, it's so much easier to get exposure at this point that, all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, there's a lot more like quality draft talent than we ever thought. So then therefore it's like, there's also more 15-year-olds, there's also more 16-year-olds that are like worth consideration. And now it's like, guys are signing NIL contracts, things like that, where you're getting to college and you're almost a pro athlete in some regards. It's like you got to be
you're
viewed
making
a
money
little bit
now too.
differently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
you're viewed
wild.
differently when you're in high school. Like that's kind of your like lead up into, before it was kind of like you're in college, you're thinking about like your pro career in a way, or like, how you're marketing yourself to get to the big leagues. Now it's almost like you're marketing yourself to get to college, and like
Yes.
what kind of like offerings college teams can give you. It's like
Mhm.
it's a whole different like ball game for them too. And you're seeing guys with social media teams. Like I think Max Clark is like the one that is really setting the trend there, as far as
Yeah.
like he's the number one prospect for the Tigers right now. He's got a whole social media team that's followed him pretty much from day one as a professional prospect out of high school. And like you're seeing just nonstop content flowing through, and like that's going to become a lot more normal, I think. And it rubs a lot of people the wrong way because like, change is hard in sports. Like we don't tend to
Yeah.
like it, but at
Yeah.
the same time, how am I supposed to blame a guy for like creating a brand and like finding other avenues to make money? Because let's say the pro career doesn't go well, you have 2 million Instagram followers now or whatever. It's like that there's avenues for you to make money there. Like people know your name, you can do ads, whatever. It's
Ye-
like there's going to be just more and more of that for sure.
Yeah. It also opens the door to agencies and things like that exploiting some of these kids, because there's a kid that I was just talking to that had a contract that was a media contract. And this is a high school kid, right? He had a media contract that he had signed that was taking 20% out of everything that he would earn in like any future earnings, right? So that would include a bat deal and anything else that he would go through. And I had talked to the dad. I'm like, buddy, like, here's the deal. Like, if anybody's taking money away from you on that, and especially at a 20% clip, you should, like, and it's guised as this, like, okay, you're signing with us, but realistically, you're kind of signing it like it's almost like John, you can speak to this because like there's record deals that you've seen, I'm sure.
I was just getting ready to say this is old school slimy manager stuff.
It's
When
100%.
you're 20 years deep in a career and you find a contract, you're going, Jesus Christ, Bob's still getting 20%. Who signed this?
Exactly.
You know?
And it's a renewing contract, it was borderline illegal within the MLBPA's contracts, which you cannot have a renewing contract. So we're talking to this kid, and he's like, well, if you get a $10,000 bat deal with Louisville Slugger, they're going to price those bats out for 10 grand or whatever it is, and they're going to talk about that the price of the actual. You're not getting a check. You're getting actual equipment. So they're going to price the equipment out, and you're going to be on the hook for a $2,000 check out of your pocket because you got bats. Like that is kind of that these kids are up against right now, and they don't know. So they're also playing off of. We're getting into this now, but they're playing off of the inexperience of these parents.
Oh, yeah.
And having them sign this that they don't understand that they're signing. So somebody like myself who doesn't take a red cent out of anybody's contract until they sign a multi-year deal in the major leagues will scream up from the top of any hill, be like, look, no, because you're also on the hook for paying these guys if you try to terminate the contract after a certain amount of time. Like, this is ridiculous that these kids that at 15, 16, 17 years old are having to sign these things.
There's another cottage industry waiting to happen soon. There's going to be a commercial. Do you have 12-year-old kids? Do they know how to throw a ball?
Not to mention,
you should lawyer up.
Not to mention,
lawyer up now.
Oh my God, no shit, man. And not to mention the fact that they're already coming out of pocket. The parents are coming out of pocket to play for these travel teams just to get them exposure. They're like, some of these guys are going down to national teams and they're paying $1,000 a month. Like, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? Like, it used to just be go play for your in-house team. Somebody's going to come see me at my high school level, and I'm gonna be on the radar. Like, and you still are, but like, I represent a client that's out in Bufu, freaking Indiana, and he's one of the best players probably in the country right now, named Tay Falls. This kid is a stud, but nobody knows his name because he's not involved in any of this besides for his perfect game showcases and everything. But like,
they know his name now.
Yeah, well, people are. I'll tell you what, I'm calling everybody, but well, he's my client. But I saw him swing 3 times. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this kid is special. But even Jim Tomei, I talked to him. He's like, God, I got him an invite to the area code games, and Jim Tomei looks at me. He goes, he looks at me, and goes, Johnny, this kid's twitchy, brother. He's pretty good. He's small, but he's good. I'm like, yeah, Jim, he's pretty good, man. Yeah, he's pretty good.
Funny sidebar about that. The first day I ever showed up to White Sox spring training, I had a Jim Tomei poster like above my bed growing up, and I saw him sitting on a golf cart, and I was like, is that him? Like, to my boss at the time, and he was like, yeah, rule number 1, don't fangirl, like keep it professional. Like these guys are not on their public facing phase right now. Like, they go 5 feet away, there's a bunch of fans waiting for them, they have to go, kiss babies and shake hands, but like, while they're in the facility around like a bunch of personnel, like, don't make them feel uncomfortable. And I was like, that's a good point. Like, but I'll try to keep professional. So, just kind of give him like a little head nod. Like, I've been there before. I was like, I absolutely have not. But like, that's the kind of, like coming to baseball, like first day, like that was a pretty surreal moment for me.
Yeah. But also,
so John and I have been on some movie sets and met some legit stars and stuff. And it's like, you don't ask your coworkers for autographs. You don't fanboy with them, because they don't talk about it. Nobody actually ever sits down and explains it, but there's very much a us and them mentality. Mm-hmm. And the moment you're one of them, you are no longer one of us. And it's, they're part of the industry. You're both doing the same jobs. You're both doing you're both working the same stuff. You don't get starstruck with your coworkers. It's just
bringing up the movie set thing. When you were talking about jobs for interns and first timers, with a lot of lamination and making sure people have the cards and stuff. That if you're down on the lower rungs, they call them sides. So you have to go to the script. You got to figure out what the actors are going to say that day, and then you have to, you have to print out 30 of these things because you got to give it to everybody in the crew and the actors so they know what they're doing that day.
Yeah,
and then half of them lose them. You got to go print up more, and it slows.
I had the exact
down.
Same thought when he
brought that up. Of just cutting up stuff and laminating, giving it the outfield.
A lot of these industries are the same.
Okay?
Yeah, I think they all are, to be honest with you.
I think the only other time I've heard of that, you're kind of mentioning that, you see an actor and you're not allowed to like, kind of be starstruck in a way, or you got to keep it professional. I remember like Eli and I faced Jackson Churio with Milwaukee, and he was like one of the best amateur prospects I've ever seen, probably the best. He's absolutely destroyed us. And he was getting promoted to high A, I remember. And I was talking to the video guy, like with Carolina at the time, their low A affiliate.
I remember.
And he was like, yeah, like I got like 5 Churio autographs. I'm like, you did? Like, that's kind of weird to ask a player, because like I think the best guy we had was Colson Montgomery. And like when he got called up, it was like, yeah, I'd love an autograph because like it could be worth something one day, but at the same time, not going to like break that barrier of like, hey, by the way, Colson, I'm still like a regular person. Like, give me an autograph. And like, apparently Churio had signed autographs for like the other players on the team, the coaching staff. Like, he signed like 100+ autographs because like everyone was just like, this kid's different. He's going to be a star. So like, let's just get him all we can. But I'm like, if everyone's in on it, that's a little different. But the thought of that, like, this is your teammate, but apparently everyone's acknowledging that he's just like a whole different breed. Might as well,
Yeah. I remember when I was in the big leagues, it used to be like when you came up or whatever. Like, I heard horror stories about guys like being in the locker room with like Roger Clemens or what, like, which scared the hell out of me because like I was with Manny Ramirez, who actually ended up being a good friend of mine. But I'm not going to ask for it because I remember a story about somebody asking for Roger Clemens' autograph that had just gotten called up. It was like his first day, and he got sent down the next day. Because, dude, what are you doing? He was probably going to get sent down anyway. But like, don't ask.
It didn't help.
Stop being a fan in the locker room. Like, you're in the locker room because you're supposed to be here. Don't act like a fan. And that is a real thing. That's a real thing across the league. But when you walk in the locker room, you're supposed to be like, humble. I'm here, and that's how I was. I know that. But some guys are not. But
that's one of the things that got hammered home to me early when I first started with the White Sox was like, don't cross any of those lines. If it feels like you're getting buddy, don't. And like, that's kind of the weird dynamic of someone in like an intern role with baseball is I'm in a single A clubhouse. I'm like the same age as most of the players. You know, I was 23 at the time. Everyone in the clubhouse is between like 19, 27. And I think the next youngest coach to me is like Eli, who's in his 30s. And it's like, that's your
I'm 40.
friend. Like you have,
Like,
now you are.
Yeah, no, at the point I was not. Yeah, sorry.
No. So it's like your friends as a 23-year-old intern are the coaching staff. Like you have to understand, like you're part of them, not part of the players. And I remember a few times they'd be like, you want to go grab a drink? And I'm like, no, like that's not the like that's not dynamic here. Like I'm sorry. Like I understand that we're probably more alike than, you know, I may like to realize, but at the same time, it's like, if you want to be taken seriously as a member of the coaching staff, like separate yourselves. Because I'd heard the stories of the guys that were interns who are, you know, sitting on the couch playing like Xbox with them before the game starts rather than doing their job. And it's like, those are the guys who don't get rehired. You know, those are the guys who
I'm not going to name any names, but yeah, there's been a few.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, there's a level of professionalism there where it's like, you know, yeah, I understand that they're maybe more similar to your friends than like the coaching staff, but like you are a member of the coaching staff. So like figure it out, you know?
Exactly.
Getting back to analytics, you had said earlier in this podcast where sometimes you're just getting a fire hose of just, you know, numbers and stats and the whole bit. So can those be used incorrectly, read incorrectly, and just cause disasters?
Great question. Yes, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, there's more data than you can ever like really choose to do anything with. And so like finding action items is really your goal in the player development side of like, you got to figure you're talking to someone who hasn't taken a math class since 8th grade, you know, whether that's true or not, like that's the view you have to take. If you start throwing a bunch of numbers at them or like abbreviations, like it's not going to transfer. Some guys want that. There are a few that like they need to know specific characteristics of their pitches. Pitchers are always a different breed too, because like they're going to overthink. They're going to know more about the analytics than hitters 95% of the time. Hitters, it's like, hey man, like just this is probably what you're seeing in these counts. You know, this is what the pitch does. You describe it in a way that is using various adjectives. It's not saying, hey, it's negative 17 horizontal break. Like that might not mean something to certain hitters, but if you say, hey, it's got similar break to the guy we faced, you know, on Friday, it's like, oh, okay, like it's similar pitch characteristics, whatever. Like you give them some sort of descriptions that it's like, this is a lot more actionable for somebody. It's kind of like a lot of these guys are visual learners. You show them a graphic of like, you know, a heat map of the zone and say, okay, the sinkers are going to be low and inside to a righty as a right-handed hitter or whatever. And those are things that they can actually look at and say, okay, I understand, like I have some sort of plan going up there. Because if you start going, hey, by the way, like in this count, it's 48% sinker, it's 37% slider. The slider is exactly these characteristics. Like it just starts being too much, because then it's like, what do I actually need to think about or do with this information when I go into the box or I step on the mound?
Yeah. I actually had to navigate some of that myself, and Brian and I did it together in our year together with the Cannonballers, which, to speak to your point, Brian, like you had guys that wanted every piece of information, and then you had guys that would never even open up the notebook. Like they would never look at it all. But like I would have a breakdown my first year and even second year as a coach in a full season team with all these numbers, where I would have counts kind of organized out. So I would have like, okay, here's swing decisions and the pitches that they hit in every single count. And I thought that was brilliant, right? So I was like, oh, across the board. This is what the guys are swinging at. This is what they're missing and everything else. Then 01, 02, everything else, every single count I had put on a piece of paper that they could look at in a binder, and realized that number one, nobody was looking at that. And number two, the guys that were going too far into the weeds, where they're like, okay, well, I got to throw a slider. It's like, no, that's not even a pitch you throw. What are you doing? Like, why are we trying to throw a slider here? Your slider sucks at 0-2. And I know this guy doesn't, like, he's got like a 90% swing and miss rate on a slider in 0-2 counts down and away, but you've never put a slider in that area ever in your life. So why are we thinking about throwing it right now? So you have to kind of refine it a little bit, and then that's why Brian and I came up with these cards for the catchers and just took it out of the pitcher's hands, and it actually helped us a lot down the stretch. Well, that and getting players with different names on their back of their jersey too.
draft guys help, yeah.
Yeah, that definitely helped a lot. But it was a huge learning curve on the coaching side to try to funnel all that information into a report that made sense for anybody that read it. Like if I gave you what Brian and I went through every single series at the back end of the season, actually the second half. How long did we do that, Brian? It was probably for 2/3 of the season, maybe, where we were doing those cards for the catchers. Yeah, where anybody could look at it and say, okay, green is good, red is bad. And these are the players in the lineup that we're going to face. This is the lineup today. And we took counts out of it. We just said, this is what you do good and this is what you do bad. And
yeah,
it was easier to give that information as opposed to giving them so much where they're overthinking every single, because this is speaking strictly from somebody that pitched in the major leagues. I didn't listen to a goddamn thing that Rick Honeycutt told me. I did, but I didn't, right? So we went through this huge breakdown of what the lineup looked like going into my start against the Tigers, against the Yankees, against whoever I pitched against. And I'm like, I'm going to throw my fastball where I'm going to throw it because I can tie your shoes with my fastball. I'm going to throw a cutter in on his hands, and I'm going to throw a changeup off of that, and then I'm going to show a curveball in the zone. That's my game. I'm going to do that no matter what. So I don't give a who's up to bat. I just need to know who can hit what and who actually profiles is. And this is what John Garland actually taught me, is like navigate the lineup. Understand who you can beat and who you can't beat based off of your stuff, because you're going to pitch to what you can do. And when I thought back on that, when Brian and I kind of simplified everything with all this wealth of information that we got, it's like, this has to be more simple. Number one, just because these guys aren't reading it. Number two, because they don't understand. They're just going to do what they like. They're going to make mistakes. So let's put them in a position to have success instead of telling them to do something that they can't do efficiently against the best hitter in the game. You know, like number one. I'm sorry, I'll shut up here in a second. We faced Jackson Holliday in High A, and he torched our. I've never seen anybody have a better series than Jackson Holliday in the first two games against us in Winston-Salem. We were throwing, like, every one of these pitchers was like, I'm going to blow him away with a fastball. I was like, for the love of God, please stop trying to throw fastballs to Jackson Holliday. He's hitting, his OPS was like 1,200. It was like through the roof. He was the best hitter in baseball off of fastballs. But we looked at like off speed, down and away, curveballs specifically. If you could confuse him and like frustrate him with curveballs down in the zone away, no matter what, like, okay, well, whatever it is that you can get down to that spot in the first two pitches, then we can run something in and then go back away, and we got him. But every single one of these guys, I got his ass. Halen Green, lefty on lefty, drops down, throws from down here from the left side, right? I'm going to run a sinker on his hands. This ball was almost in the dugout of the opposing team's dugout. So like in the left-hander's batter's box. Jackson Holliday hit this thing 7,000 feet for his 11th RBI of the game, or whatever it was. He almost, in 5 innings. I'm like, did you finally learn your lesson? Are you going to listen? And then we had Dollander, Hunter Dollander, that went in there and he's like, I'm going to listen to the game plan, and strikes him out 3 times in a game. Like, what are we doing here? So there's so much player error, but we have, sorry, I went off on a tangent there, but.
I specifically remember that series because I think after game 3, I was with the Tigers at this point. So like, not with the White Sox. Eli called me, I think like after game 3 or game 4, I'm in my hotel room after the game.
I need help.
And he was like, what do I do against this kid? Like, please. And I think we like tried to figure it out, and it was still just like, yeah, if you miss by like 2 inches, it's gone. So like, do your best. You know, it's just like, this is kind of how you can attack it. Yeah, it's like I think to your point though, like everyone wants to challenge a guy like that because in the minors especially, it's like you're trying to prove yourself. You want to get to the next level. You want to say, I'm better than everyone here. I deserve the call. And like you need an overconfidence as an athlete to compete at that level. I think Eli probably knows that better than all of us. Like you need to convince yourself that you belong. And especially a guy like Jackson Holliday, he's 19 years old. He looks like a child. Like he's baby face. It's like I can beat this kid. Like
he
absolutely.
looks like the bad boy, dude. He really did.
And it's like, yeah, it's like some guys are simply better than you, and you can like just accept that and move on. But like you got to try. It's like, okay, no, you throw 93. It's something he's already hammered 6 times in this series. Like you're not any different. But like if you need to try just to prove yourself that you can do it, it's like there's an overconfidence that I think can obviously be a bit of a deteriorating factor for some of these guys. But at the same time, I don't blame them for trying.
Yeah, I don't. But until we start losing games because of it, we won that game too, by the way, because it was a rain thing, and we ended up hitting like 3 home runs in the bottom of the like 5th to make it a complete game, and end up taking them over. Like Jackson actually had 5 RBIs in 5 innings, and he was on pace. He was going to hit for the cycle. He was a triple away, and it was going to happen. Like he had 2 home runs. No, he had a double. He was a single away. That's what it was. He was a single away because he went double, home run, and triple, and cleared the bases every single time. I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do here? I don't want to talk but then finally we ended up beating him like 9-8 or something like that off of Jackson Holliday's like career game. And we went back into the clubhouse after that. It was like, I talked to Brian DeAngelis, the GM. I was like, hey, there's enough rain to cancel this right now, right? He's like, we're going to cancel it because I don't want to lose this game. I was like, neither do I, because we're not going to win if we have to face this guy 5 more times or 3 more times because we don't have the pitching to do it. Like this guy was so good.
Hey, speaking of rain, does weather and ballparks do they factor into analytics at all?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the there's a lot of different stats you'll see that are like adjusted stats. So anything with a plus normally at the end of it is era adjusted and park adjusted. So I think anyone can say like hitting at Coors Field is different than hitting at Seattle. Like there's weather aspects, there's elevation aspects, there are ballpark sizes. And like that's one of the best parts about baseball, in my opinion, is like every single football field is the same exact dimensions, every single basketball court, same exact dimensions. Weather is obviously an impact in football as well. But like you've hit a high fly ball in Fenway versus you hit a high fly ball in Detroit, and it's like one gets caught and one's a double. It's like, I don't know. I think it's kind of a fun aspect to it. So like you'll definitely see certain hitters get targeted by certain organizations where like Alex Bregman absolutely mashed in Houston. He pulls fly balls left field all day. Boston goes and picks him up. Same thing. Now he's in Chicago. It's like some of those are dying at the track now. It's like there are guys like you start seeing, okay, this is going to play a lot better at this park, or like, a guy with a 800 OPS in Coors with the Rockies is not the same as 800 OPS in Seattle. And so that's where you'll see those adjusted stats try to account for that as well. And same thing with eras, because the dead ball era when Bob Gibson is just chucking 100 at you or whatever, like, getting a single at that time is a little different than getting a single in the steroid era. Like you see guys where Dante Bichette, you look at his numbers at the end, it's like steroid era plus Coors. Sorry, buddy. Like, your OPS doesn't mean as much. It's like
stay in Colorado. Yeah,
it's a little tough because like it does discount some guys, but also brings other guys up where, you see Julio Rodriguez in Seattle putting up an 800 OPS, and it's like, that's pretty impressive. That's a tough park to hit in, Yeah,
that's why expected numbers are so huge in predication of future success. That's why a lot of clubs will go off of XFIP, X WOBA, X everything. So expected numbers over a big, portion of your stats. So it's difficult to do when you have a short list of what your stats actually look like. So, but if you see a guy over a course of a season and you put his expected numbers into your system and say, okay, well, I think we should try to go after this guy because he could, in our park, do this or do that. Or over the course of his career, I'm going to go out and get this guy because I think he has a 4 ERA or a 5 ERA in Colorado. That's that's not exactly based off the defense and everything else. And the park, it actually, you can predict that he's going to have a much better long-term career, assuming those expected numbers. So like a lot of these scouting departments, that if they're not actually going off of that, are screwing up, and most of them are now. And that's why, talking about our original point of how analytics have been integrated into, how we predict what guys are going to do and why guys get passed up over others, is because we can see future success based off of a wealth of information and their actual body of work, as opposed to 1 year or 1 month even. Although a month can change your career because you've done a lot, and it maybe gets you a call up and a cup of coffee, but nobody's going to give you a long-term contract if you have a really good month in the big leagues. And I can speak to that because I had a really good year in 2010, and maybe I would have been better, but over the course of time, is that going to translate to a 10-year career? Well, that's what we're trying to predict, and expected numbers actually do that for us.
I have to tie in something that I've been thinking about since you asked about it. Johnny, you mentioned something along the lines of like our sports bettors and sports books kind of getting involved in some of these things.
Mhm.
And it takes me back to, we were like, when I was in AA, we had a hitter who threw like 400 plate appearances. So 2/3 of their season, maybe more, had 2 home runs. So just like not really a power threat in that regard. And somehow I saw the lines for the pregame betting. I think I was in the stands and someone had like the little like sports book, tab open. And he had a plus 450 for for a home run in the game. I was like, he has 2 home runs and 400 plate appearances. And if I bet he hits one today, his third, I'll get 40, like, if I bet $10, I'm getting $45 back. I'm like, I should get $3,000.
Yeah,
Like,
no shit. Yeah.
I don't know who sets those odds, but as soon as I saw that, I was like, this is actually criminal. Like, I had no clue what we were doing. So yeah, I love to think that like whoever's doing like minor league sports betting is just completely guessing on like some of these lines, because I was like, whoever's betting these is just like
you can
trying to
bet
throw
minor
money
league sports
away.
lines.
I was stunned. I saw that somewhere, and I was like,
I didn't know that.
yeah, it might have been illegal for all I saw.
It
But
should be illegal. That's
whatever
insane.
this guy saw. I mean, you could bet college games, so it wouldn't surprise me you can bet minors. These guys are professionals. It's just that I don't know if like FanDuel or DraftKings and those things have it, but I bet you could find like the local bookies will do it or something.
Yeah.
Good God.
Do they have those, I forget what you call it, those things that track everyone? Do they have those set up at college stadiums?
It's standard to have TrackMan at college stadiums. However, you'll get games on Hawkeye when they go play at like exhibition games for like the SEC tournament, or not even tournament, but like they'll do opening weekend tournaments at like Arlington at the Rangers Stadium, or they'll go to like Surprise and play at like some of the spring training complexes. So you will get Hawkeye data on some college clients, but at the same time, like it's a share network. So if you have TrackMan data, you get everyone else's TrackMan data that is also getting yours. And so a lot of these teams won't get the Hawkeye data unless like someone sends them kind of the CSV that they get at the end of the game for it. So there is Hawkeye data for college clients, but I think only like MLB teams get it, and then the actual teams that played that game.
So the colleges aren't using it for their own competitive purposes.
No, it's very expensive to install. Yes. And so like a lot of these programs, it's like we're talking, Power 4, sure, but like still it's hundreds of thousands of dollars to install that, a lot of these teams are not going to cough up. And then at the same time, then you're no longer on the shared network either.
Yeah.
Are there security concerns when you're with these analytics? Does that play?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where like everyone's going to kind of know your data, that like if you are seeing theirs, they're seeing yours pretty much. And so like what you're keeping in-house is pretty small, but then there's a lot of teams that do have like internal systems and internal sites that they've built out where they have their own versions of stats. They have their own version of WAR, things like that, where that is proprietary data and like, private to each individual organization. But I think like majority of the stuff that like you're looking at, you can find on Baseball Savant and just like various websites that have some of those like pitch characteristics and things like that. It's not really like private information necessarily, but then, if you throw a bullpen on the side, like that is private
Yeah.
info still, like
Right.
you're not exposing that to like a larger base.
I have a question, and I've always wondered this. How do they calculate WAR? Like, I know it's a stat, and I know everyone follows it, but to me, it seems so subjective that how would you even go around calculating a stat to make WAR other than some guy just saying, well, this is what it is? I mean, like, I know how you can calculate an ERA or RBI, but how do you calculate the value you have over the next guy up?
I don't have a specific formula for you. I wish I did. There is a bit of like mystery in that regard. The basic differences of like Baseball Reference versus Fangraphs is going to be the defensive values that they use. On the pitching side, Fangraphs uses FIP instead of ERA. Baseball References uses ERA instead of FIP. Some of the defensive metrics are different, and I think that's where you see the biggest discrepancies in WAR is often around the defense, because we don't really still have a great way to evaluate defense. You'll see like outs above average and defensive runs saved are kind of the two main ones that you'll see often cited. And outs above average tells you Junior Caminero is the worst third baseman of all time. Defensive run saved tells you he's average. And it's like, how are we this different still in this era? But like at the same time, what you're quantifying with is different. Like stopping an out versus stopping a run is two different scenarios. And when I was at Sports Info Solutions, we were focused on defensive runs saved. And one of the guys that was training me at the time explained, let's say you have bases loaded, 1 out, you're up by 3, and you have a shallow like blooping single. That left fielder decides not to dive for it, keeps it in front of him, 1 run scores, you're still up by 2. If the outs above average calculation looks at that, they say you didn't catch that ball, therefore you failed, in a sense. You're going to get penalized for that. Defensive run saved is rewarding you for the fact that you're not diving and letting that ball get by you and scoring 3 runs instead of 1. There's like different ways to qualify and I guess quantify it that both stats try to account for. So unfortunately, I don't have an exact like, hey, Michael, this is how WAR's calculated, but it's just more like.
So it basically is just some guy with a cigar and a glass of booze just saying this is what it is.
There's a meme waiting to happen. This is our war room, and it's a closet inside. There's a guy dressed like a wizard trying to do alchemy.
I think it'll get you where you need to go. Like, it's not like Shohei Ohtani is somehow like undervalued on WAR. It's like it all kind of checks out. It's like this is a phenomenal hitter who plays good defense. His WAR is high. Like I think it tends to line up. Offensively, it's a lot easier to quantify those things because you just say like he had a 900 OPS. You adjust that for the era and you adjust that for the ballpark. Some guys are going to get devalued because of that. Others are going to get brought up. There's a defensive spectrum to it as well. So like putting up a 900 OPS at first base is not the same as 900 OPS at catcher. Like they account for that as well. So that's where you'll see, a Cal Raleigh put up, close to 10 WAR last year or whatever it was, because it's like 60 homers from the catcher position is a different ball game, versus like Judge doing it in right field. It's like it is a different like value metric in that way.
There's also certain things that you can quantify into that factor that make more sense, that are a little bit better to wait on, like FIP and XFIP for pitchers. I think that's it's a fairly accurate assessment of what your WAR might be. Like fielding independent pitching is FIP, right? So a lot of guys, most casual fans won't understand what like WOBA, FIP, and all these things. Like fielding independent pitching, which means basically you take the infield and outfield error out of what the pitcher does. So it's strikeouts, walks, and home runs. Correct, Ryan?
Yeah.
Sorry, Brian. And then XFIP would be, based off of the ballpark. So your average, like if I play in Coors Field and those fly balls that are carrying out, or Fenway was a perfect example, where I'm giving up an average fly ball that is hitting the left field wall for a double, which would typically be an out in Petco or something like that. It takes that into account, and it kind of factors into your WAR. The walks and your average hits per inning and everything else, which you could look at from whip and your strikeout rate and everything else, but it factors all those things in and spits out a WAR that is some of those metrics are more more relevant, sorry, within that WAR aspect. But like Brian said, there are some things that are kind of weighted more by each organization.
I think, particularly with offensive players or just like position players, the defensive aspect is the most confusing to a lot of people, and even like base running events too, where it's like, a guy steals a base, it's easy to obviously view that as a positive success, but it's like, okay, this ball goes to right center, he probably should have scored on it, but he didn't. It's like, saying objectively how many guys would have scored in that position is hard. Like, there's a bit more of a, I guess, kind of behind the scenes guy with a cigar in the closet or whatever it is deciding to do it. I think to Eli's point, like FIP is an interesting stat because it got a lot of runway for sure of like, okay, this is different from ERA. It's trying to not view ground balls, fly balls that are like actually getting fielded. It's just looking at the non-playable events in a way. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I always think of like Rick Porcello for some reason. Like his last year with the Mets, I want to say he gave up like 2 hits an inning almost, pretty much, but like no home runs, no walks. So his FIP was like 3, but his ERA was like over 6. And it's like, if I'm giving up doubles in the gap all the time, like it doesn't hurt my FIP, but it's like, I think anyone can see that and go, obviously, like he's not getting outs, and like some of those are going to go over the fence eventually, and like that's where the stats like a little misleading. So really, like when you're trying to look at values of guys, it's kind of combining everything into your own picture and say like, I look at his FIP, I look at his ERA, I look at his xFIP, I look at his Sierra. Like there's all these fun little quantifiers that you can then go, okay, this is probably more of like the true performance in a way, because we see fluctuations where a guy is a career kind of, mid-4 ERA or whatever, and then they are in Cy Young consideration one year. And it's like, what went differently? It's like, I don't know, like 20 balls in play that just kind of got caught instead. It's like, it could be a pretty small sample that ends up having a large impact on the guy's entire season trajectory.
Yeah, I had a Gold Glove center fielder and a Gold Glove shortstop that year. So, I had a 3 ERA, but every other year when I get traded to the Rockies, all of a sudden I have 5. Well, of course I did, because these guys aren't making the plays behind me. So that's the predicator right there. Gentlemen, it's been a joy having everybody on the pod. Brian, thank you for coming on. It's a pleasure as always, and I would love to have you back here amongst all of our prominent and very prestigious guests that we're going to have. I think so far you've been my favorite. Kevin, sorry you were the last one, but we are going to sign off here. We have been 2 Johns and a Mike. Thank you for listening. Gentlemen, we'll see you next time.